Before you decide this isn't about you, let me ask you something. What if the person you consider your soulmate has been quietly doing the hardest work of their life, alone, in silence, without ever telling you? What if the version of them that once pulled away, shut down, or couldn't meet you emotionally was never the real them at all, but a wounded version standing guard in front of someone they weren't ready to let you see? Most people believe a soulmate connection should feel effortless from the very beginning. But the truth is far more complicated, and far more meaningful. Some of the deepest connections require one or both people to descend into parts of themselves they've spent a lifetime avoiding before that connection can fully exist in the way it was always meant to. Right now, while you're watching this, your soulmate may be in the middle of, or emerging from, exactly that descent. They may be confronting patterns they inherited from childhood, facing fears they never admitted to another living soul, and dismantling beliefs about love that were never actually theirs to begin with. They may be sitting with memories they buried years ago, feeling emotions they trained themselves to suppress, and asking themselves difficult questions about why closeness has always felt so dangerous. But before you assume this is only about their private struggle, there's something more important to understand. This isn't just a story about someone doing inner work behind closed doors. It's about how that work, however invisible it may seem to you, is quietly reshaping the way they're capable of loving, capable of staying, capable of finally showing up as who they really are underneath the fear. Because sometimes the truest form of love isn't a dramatic gesture or a perfect first meeting. It's the unglamorous, private, often painful process of a person confronting their own shadow so that what they eventually offer you is real instead of a performance. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to hear may completely change the way you understand soulmate connections, inner healing, and the quiet, unseen transformation happening in someone who is never actually running from you, only from themselves. Have you ever sensed that someone's distance had nothing to do with how they felt about you, and everything to do with a war happening somewhere inside them you couldn't see? That instinct is usually right. And what happens after that inner war is often the most important part of the story. The term shadow work gets used often, but rarely explained with the depth it deserves. Your shadow is not evil, and it is not some hidden villain inside you. It is simply the collection of emotions, beliefs, and experiences a person has learned to reject, suppress, or deny because, at some point, those parts of them were unsafe to express. A child who was punished for crying may grow into an adult who cannot tolerate their own sadness. A person who watched love turn into abandonment may grow into someone who sabotages closeness the moment it starts to feel real. These patterns are not conscious choices. They are protective structures built long before a person had the language to understand what they were protecting themselves from. In a soulmate connection, these hidden structures rarely stay hidden for long. This is one of the reasons soulmate relationships are often described as intense, even destabilizing, in ways ordinary relationships are not. A soulmate connection has a strange ability to reach directly into the places a person has spent their entire life avoiding. It surfaces old wounds not to punish, but because genuine intimacy simply cannot exist where those wounds remain buried. This is why so many soulmate connections involve a period of distance, confusion, or even separation before they can fully stabilize. It is rarely because the love wasn't real. It is because the presence of that love became too illuminating. It shone a light directly onto patterns the person had never been forced to look at before, and the instinct, at first, is almost always to retreat from that light rather than stand in it. If your soulmate went through a period of pulling away, shutting down, or needing distance, it is worth considering that this may not have been rejection of you at all. It may have been the exact moment their own shadow became impossible to keep ignoring, and they simply were not yet equipped to face it while also staying close to you. Shadow work, when someone finally chooses to do it, is not glamorous. It looks like uncomfortable therapy sessions. It looks like journaling entries that end in tears. It looks like sitting alone at night finally admitting things to themselves they spent years denying even existed. It is not a dramatic, cinematic process. It is slow, private, and often invisible to everyone except the person living through it. But when someone does this work honestly, something in them fundamentally shifts. And that shift rarely stays contained to their inner world alone. It begins to change everything about how they show up in connection, including, and especially, with you. Real shadow work almost always begins with discomfort. A person cannot heal a wound they refuse to acknowledge exists. And so, before transformation can happen, there is usually a period where everything the person has avoided starts surfacing all at once, often uninvited. Your soulmate may have gone through, or may currently be going through, a period where old emotional patterns became impossible to explain away. Perhaps they noticed themselves repeating the same defensive reaction in every close relationship, the same instinct to withdraw the moment things felt too real. Perhaps they finally recognized a belief they had carried since childhood, that love always eventually leaves, that vulnerability always eventually gets punished, and realize that belief was shaping every choice they made in love without their permission. This recognition is rarely comfortable. It often arrives with grief, not just for the pain being uncovered, but for all the years spent unconsciously protecting themselves from a threat that, in the present, may no longer even exist. They may begin mourning relationships damaged by patterns they didn't yet understand, including, potentially, moments in their connection with you. As this process deepens, they may start questioning identities they had built their entire personality around. The belief that they were simply not built for commitment. The conviction that independence and emotional distance were the same thing. The idea that needing someone made them weak rather than human. These beliefs, once treated as unquestionable facts about themselves, begin to reveal themselves as defense mechanisms, learned responses to old pain rather than fixed truths about who they are. This kind of realization tends to unfold gradually, through therapy, through solitary reflection, through moments life presents that make the old pattern impossible to keep repeating without consequence. It is rarely instant. It is rarely clean. But it is often the beginning of a transformation more significant than anything that happens on the surface of a relationship. As their awareness deepens, something important begins to shift internally. Self-judgment slowly gives way to self-understanding. Instead of hating themselves for the ways they hurt people, including you, while operating from an unhealed place, they begin to see those actions with more compassion, not to excuse the impact, but to finally understand the fear underneath it. This shift matters enormously, because a person cannot offer real intimacy from a place of self-hatred. Shame keeps people hidden. Compassion, even self-directed compassion, is what allows a person to finally step out from behind their defenses and let someone see them clearly, often for the first time. From the outside, during this period, your soulmate may have seemed distant, inconsistent, or difficult to understand. But internally, an entirely different process may have been unfolding, one where an old identity built on self-protection was finally, slowly, being replaced by something far more honest. Shadow work rarely announces itself with clarity. It often reveals itself through small, quiet moments that carry unexpected emotional weight. Your soulmate may have found themselves suddenly overwhelmed by a memory they hadn't thought about in years, a childhood moment, an old relationship, a specific instance of feeling unseen that had long been buried under layers of coping and distraction. These memories often resurface not because anything mystical is happening, but because doing shadow work loosens the grip that kept certain emotional material locked away. They may have started noticing recurring dreams, dreams that return them to childhood homes, unresolved conversations, or symbolic representations of the very fears they were beginning to face in waking life. Dreams during periods of deep inner work often become more vivid and more emotionally charged, because the conscious mind's usual filters relax during sleep, allowing suppressed material to surface more freely. They may have also experienced unexpected waves of emotion in situations that would not have affected them before, tearing up during a conversation that touched an old wound, feeling inexplicably moved by a song, a film, or even a stranger's story that mirrored their own unspoken pain. These moments are not random. They are signs that the emotional walls a person has spent years maintaining are finally beginning to soften. As this process continued, your soulmate may have started noticing patterns they'd never consciously connected before, how a current fear of abandonment traced directly back to an early experience of being left, or how their instinct to control every outcome in relationships stemmed from growing up in an environment where unpredictability meant danger. Recognizing these connections is often one of the most powerful moments in shadow work, because it transforms a vague, overwhelming feeling into something specific enough to finally be addressed. This growing self-awareness often changes how a person relates to their own emotional reactions moving forward. Where they once dismissed a wave of anxiety or sadness as irrational or inconvenient, they may begin approaching those feelings with curiosity instead, asking what old wound might be getting triggered, rather than simply trying to suppress the discomfort as quickly as possible. This shift, from suppression to curiosity, is one of the clearest markers that real shadow work is taking place, and it rarely stays confined to a person's private inner world. Slowly, it begins to change the way they show up in every relationship that matters to them, including the one they share, or once shared, with you. One of the most fascinating aspects of shadow work is that its effects often become visible in a person's behavior before they consciously recognize the change happening within themselves. Your soulmate may not have sat down one day and decided, from this point forward, I will communicate differently, I will stay present instead of withdrawing, I will let myself be vulnerable. Real transformation rarely works that way. Instead, they may have simply noticed, almost by surprise, that an old defensive reaction didn't fire the way it used to. A moment that once would have triggered withdrawal instead met with presence. A conversation that once would have ended in shutdown instead continued, uncomfortable but honest. These small shifts often accumulate quietly. They may notice themselves apologizing more genuinely, without the defensiveness that used to accompany accountability. They may notice themselves asking questions instead of assuming, staying curious about another person's experience instead of immediately protecting their own position. They may notice a growing willingness to sit with discomfort in a conversation instead of ending it prematurely just to escape the emotional intensity. Another significant shift often shows up in how they talk about the past, including their history with you. Where they may have once offered simplified, defensive explanations for difficult moments, "I just needed space, it wasn't the right time," they may begin offering more honest, more complicated accounts. They may start acknowledging fear where they once claimed certainty, admitting confusion where they once performed confidence. This growing honesty is not a performance for your benefit. It is happening because shadow work fundamentally changes a person's relationship with their own truth. Once someone becomes willing to see their own fear clearly, it becomes very difficult to keep hiding that fear from the people closest to them. Your soulmate may also begin measuring their emotional responses differently, noticing when an overreaction seems disproportionate to the present situation and wondering, with real curiosity rather than self-criticism, what older wound might be speaking through that reaction. This kind of self-observation, done consistently, gradually rewires the automatic patterns a person has relied on for most of their life. What makes this stage so significant is that none of it requires an audience. Your soulmate is not doing this work to prove something to you, or to win you back, or to perform growth for external validation. They are doing it because the discomfort of staying the same has finally become greater than the discomfort of changing. And it is precisely this internal, unwitnessed honesty that makes the transformation real rather than temporary. There is a common misunderstanding about soulmate connections, that if two people are truly meant for each other, everything should unfold smoothly and immediately. In reality, some of the most enduring connections require significant inner work from one or both people before they are capable of sustaining the depth the connection demands. Your soulmate may currently be in, or emerging from, a season that appears to have little to do with you on the surface. They may be in therapy, working through family patterns, processing old grief, rebuilding a relationship with themselves that was fractured long before you ever met. None of this may look, from the outside, like preparation for love, but it very often is exactly that. Every pattern they interrupt, every old belief they question, every moment of honest self-reflection they choose over avoidance, is quietly building the emotional capacity required to sustain real intimacy. A person cannot offer consistent presence if they have never learned to tolerate their own discomfort. They cannot offer trust if they have never examined why trust once felt so dangerous. Shadow work is often the invisible foundation beneath a person's ability to finally love without the old defenses running the show. During this period, your soulmate may begin releasing expectations they once carried into relationships, the belief that a partner should complete them, or that love should never involve discomfort or conflict. In place of these expectations, a more grounded understanding often emerges, one where love is not about being rescued from their own unresolved pain, but about two people choosing to grow, imperfectly and honestly, alongside each other. This inner work often reshapes how they remember their history with you as well. Rather than focusing only on the moments they pulled away or fell short, they may begin to see the fuller picture, the genuine connection that existed underneath the fear, the specific ways you may have reached them even when they weren't yet capable of receiving it fully. None of this transformation happens quickly, and very little of it will be visible from the outside while it's occurring. Much like roots strengthening beneath the soil long before any growth appears above ground, this process unfolds quietly, without announcement, without applause. But it is happening. And by the time your soulmate feels ready to show up in connection again, whether with you or eventually with someone else, they will be doing so from a foundation built on self-awareness rather than fear. When someone we love is doing deep inner work, it is natural to become almost entirely focused on their process, wondering what they're realizing, when they'll be ready, whether the changes will last. These questions are understandable, but they can quietly pull your attention away from work that deserves your own focus just as much. The truth is, soulmate connections rarely ask only one person to grow. More often, they invite both people into their own version of this descent, their own shadow, their own patterns worth examining. If you've spent this time waiting, watching, analyzing their transformation from the outside, it may be worth turning some of that attention inward instead. What defenses have you built over the years? What beliefs about love, worth, or safety have quietly shaped your own choices without your full awareness? What patterns might you be repeating in this connection, or others, that deserve the same honest examination you've been giving to theirs? This is not about assigning blame. Shadow work, done well, is never about deciding who is more wrong. It is about each person becoming more whole, more honest, and more capable of real intimacy. When you engage in this work for yourself, you are not waiting passively for someone else's transformation to determine your worth or your next step. You are actively becoming someone capable of meeting real love when it arrives, rather than someone who has simply been standing by, unchanged, hoping someone else's growth will be enough for both of you. This inner work also changes the quality of your patients. Instead of anxiously monitoring their process for signs they're finally ready, you develop a steadier internal presence, rooted not in controlling the outcome, but in trusting your own capacity to keep growing regardless of what they choose. It is worth remembering that you cannot do someone else's shadow work for them, and trying to manage or accelerate their process from the outside rarely helps. What you can do is continue your own honest reckoning with the parts of yourself you may have avoided looking at directly. And ironically, this is often when the healthiest version of reconnect becomes possible, not because you finally said or did something perfect, but because you became someone equally capable of showing up whole. Whether your paths continue to intertwine or eventually diverge, the deeper truth remains the same. A soulmate connection was never meant to leave either person exactly as they were before it began. Its purpose, whether either of you consciously chose it or not, has always included this, revealing exactly what needed to be healed in order for real love, honest and unguarded, to finally be possible. If your soulmate has been doing this work quietly, in private, without fanfare, understand that this may be one of the most meaningful things they have ever done, not just for the relationship, but for themselves. And if you've been doing your own version of this work while you waited, understand that it has not been wasted time. It has been preparation, whether it ultimately leads back to them or towards something else entirely. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. If any part of this message resonated with your own experience, I hope it offered a little clarity about what's been happening beneath the surface, and a little piece about the parts of the story you couldn't see. This has been the Archetype Awakening. I hope this video helped you understand that real transformation is rarely loud, rarely immediate, and almost never visible until long after it begins. Wishing you patience with their process, compassion for your own, and the quiet trust that whatever is meant to unfold between you will do so once both of you are finally ready to meet it honestly. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next video.